In this episode, Golden and I discuss Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 1 with friend of the show, David Raiklen. Full speed ahead.
The Omega Beam. Full power. The Omega Beam.
Welcome to the Omega Beam number 180. I'm your host, Oren Merton. Paramount Plus has been on a roll, delivering a lot of new Star Trek universe shows, and the latest live-action series to air is Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 1. We were able to convince friend of the show and Star Trek expert David Raiklen to join us for a discussion. It begins spoiler-free and then gets very wide-ranging, so keep that in mind, and let's get going. I am here with friend of the show, David Raiklen and Golden.
Hi.
To talk about Star Trek Strange New Worlds, the latest live-action original series in the Star Trek universe that Paramount Plus has created pretty much entirely for their streaming service. I know that Star Trek Discovery, the pilot, was shown on CBS way back, but I think since then it's all just been straight streaming. And Star Trek Strange New Worlds is the latest. Before we get into it, I have a confession to make. And that is, in Season 2 of Star Trek Discovery, when they first introduced Anson Mount as Captain Pike and Ethan Peck as Mr. Spock and Rebecca Romaine as Number 1, I was immediately one of those people who was saying, oh my God, give them a show. I want to see them in a show. They just had so much presence and charisma. They inhabited those characters. And honestly, I would say they were my favorite part of Discovery Season 2 was, the Enterprise crew, basically. And
yes,
I couldn't have been happier that they got their own show.
Well, they actually got their own show pretty quickly.
Well, the fans were begging for it. So yeah, I'm not surprised. So Golden, David, what did you guys think of the show before we go spoilers into
it? Really felt like Discovery really set Star Trek on a new path in terms of what it could do and what it could mean. Mm-hmm. And Strange New Worlds is just branching off of that.
Okay.
It's excellent. Each of the episodes has a lot of content, a lot of character, and a lot of depth.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I also strongly feel that the whole first season, and I'm guessing the future seasons of Strange New World, are a retelling, a reimagining of Star Trek, the original series, the characters and the plot situations, combined with some other classic science fiction.
Yeah,
I would suspect that our world has changed enough that it's harder for people to go back and look at the TOS and really relate to it because of the changes in technology and storytelling style. Mm-hmm. So I think we're looking at taking those characters and ideas and doing the 2022 version of it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to say it because my take on it is really combining both of your takes, that I agree that Star Trek Discovery brought Star Trek to the new millennium. It brought, with the polish and, bringing the mythology and everything, I think it really brought everything forward. And I think Strange New Worlds is the spiritual successor to the original series.
It is the spiritual successor. And the literal successor.
Right, and the literal successor. I think, and this is something, I'll talk about in the spoiler-filled section later, but I think Anson Mount's Captain Pike, though canonically he is before Kirk, is in many ways the more modern, contemporary, adult, if you will, take on that kind of captain. And
yes.
I think that the way they've integrated the characters that we know from TOS, such as Uhura, Number 1 from the original pilot, The Cage, Mr. Spock, with a brand new, very diverse cast. Oh, I forgot to mention
Nurse Chapel?
Nurse Chapel, Christine Chapel, of course, got to include her. They've included a diverse cast of people we don't know, but that we're getting to know, and that are wonderful. You know, television works when it's a family that you want to invite into your house. And Strange New World is a group of people that you really want to invite into your house. And I think that whereas so many shows, and I think Discovery actually suffered from this a little bit, but
Well, sure, Captain Pike will cook up something for you.
Isn't that the best? But you know, so many shows today, it almost feels like they feel they have to be serialized. That each one has to be a particular, you know, section, chapter, whatever, of a soap opera. I think the fact that Strange New Worlds has a continuing thread, but is basically episodic, I think it really helps, especially, like we said, the spiritual successor of the original series, which was episodic. One of the great strengths of the 60s show was each episode, it would try and take a real social issue of the day, and it would try and explore it. And maybe the next episode was a different social issue. And if everything you're doing has to be the exact next rung in the ladder of a serialized story, you can't really do that as much. You can have an overarching social story, but you don't have the freedom to go from idea to idea to idea like you did back in those days. And I think that it really benefits Strange New World to be able to be that agile in the stories that they tell.
Yes, and I do think there's a season arc and a character arc too. It's just that it's being handled in a subtler way.
Right. Yeah. So ending the spoiler free, because I just love this show so much. There's so many things I want to talk about, but yeah, I mean, everything you'd expect of a modern show. The effects are wonderful. The direction, of course, of each episode is wonderful. The actors are all at the top of their game. The writing is really, really good. The music is good. The music very much harkens back to the original series, but it doesn't copy, it more echoes themes from the original series. Although you do occasionally, it'll just bring in, you know, like Andrew Courage's theme or something from, you know, if that's what it's trying to do.
And they do it subtly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we sat there with the last episode and said that's the classic theme right there.
Right.
Well, Naomi Millimad or someone working with her really knows their Trek music.
Yeah.
Because there are references made in the soundtrack that are poetic for that moment. Gosh, I'm not sure if this is spoilery or not. There's a Jerry Goldsmith quote for a scene or a section of an episode that is clearly inspired by a movie that Jerry Goldsmith scored. So they're knowingly saying, okay, we are borrowing the story idea and updating it, and we're going to borrow the music from it and update that too.
Yeah, a lot of intelligence clearly went into this show. A lot of intelligence, a lot of love. By the way, I've only watched a couple, but another veteran of Star Trek, Will Wheaton, does a streaming show called The Ready Room, which is like the after show, where they will interview various actors and writers and producers who have worked on specific episodes and stuff. And it's just so clear listening to these people, and Will, of course, being from the world, is able to really get good questions, not just the shallow, how did you like wearing your uniform, but get to the heart of it. And you can tell that everybody involved, whether we're talking about a producer or an actor or a writer, so much thought and so much artistry and intelligence went into everything that they did. And the reasons for doing something were never because it would be cool or whatever. There was always something behind it. And it was nice. It's nice to get that sometimes, if you're one of these people who likes to be immersed in this world. It was kind of nice. So if you're not watching this show, I would say, as someone who has enjoyed almost all of the new Trek shows, and they've they've got a lot of them. I mean, Star Trek Discovery really ushered in a new world of Trek, with Discovery and Picard and Lower Decks and Prodigy and now Strange New Worlds. There's so many new Trek shows. The only one that isn't for me is Star Trek Prodigy, which is a wonderful Nickelodeon style cartoon for kids. It was I didn't quite.
We made it a couple episodes.
Yeah, it's clearly aimed at a much younger audience than me. Maybe it's something I'll show my daughter when she's old enough. Maybe she'll get into it. So I'm certainly not bad mouthing the show, but it's the one I couldn't really get into. But Strange New Worlds is my favorite. I definitely like this
it's my
one.
favorite too, and still got that young adult style where people are not talking so much like professional scientists and soldiers. They're talking more like teenagers, but I can handle it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with it. I don't feel like the show is talking down to me. I'm just watching a young adult hybrid
It's
with
talking,
Star Trek.
It's talking casually, but not, treating you like you can't understand English.
Yes. Well, Star Trek is mostly science fiction, but it's also got touches of fantasy in it. So it's not like watching The Martian.
Right.
The Martian is also science fiction.
But that's hard
but in
science
some ways,
fiction.
It feels less imaginative than Star Trek because the technology is supposed to look really cool.
Right. All right. So I think we're going to get into spoilers. Spoilers. 1, 2, 3. Spoilers. So I was very curious when this show began because in Discovery, they made it clear that Pike knew what was going to happen to him, basically in the 1960s original series when we meet him in the Menagerie parts 1 and 2. And I was like, okay, how are they going to deal with that? Is this going to be like every single show? Is he going to be a broken man? But I like how they brought it in the first episode, and I like how they sort of end capped the season with that same thing. I thought that was just the right amount of not making it the emphasis of the entire series, but at the same time making it clear to us it never goes away, that he's never... he may be more relaxed and it may not be front and center, but it's not like he just forgets, oh yeah, by the way, I've got, the clock is ticking. So I liked how they did that. I do like how they bring up serious issues, prejudice and all the rest. I really like how they dance around original series episodes. Some of my very favorite episodes, like Arena with the Gorn and Balance of Terror, which is what they did with the finale, where it's sort of the submarine episode with the Romulan captain, who, for those of us who are full-on original series nerds, we know that the Romulan captain was played by Mark Leonard, who then went on to play Spock's father.
Yes, I don't know if they'll have that connection this time, but they definitely used some of the same dialogue as Balance of Terror.
They did. They used some of the exact same dialogue. And I loved that. And I like how, like you were saying, that they're modernizing. And a perfect example of what you were talking about is the Gorn. That the Gorn were always supposed to be this incredibly fearsome, terrifying enemy. And unfortunately, when you're dealing with a limited budget, they kind of took whatever monster costume happened to be on, the back lot and stuck the guy in it. And so he kind of looked like a lizard man with disco eyes. And
yes,
I really love how in these episodes, which the directors and the writers really leaned heavily on like aliens and stuff to like an alien to kind of get the horror element, the suspense element in the Gorn episodes. But I like how the original series did what it could for the time. And here we are all these years later, and they just pulled the Gorn and said, okay, this is what you would have done had you been able to.
Well,
And I
think
love
it's
that.
part that, and I think it's part that they are retelling Alien,
Yeah,
the first Alien.
yeah. And I love that. And I love how Captain Pike, the original series, for all of Captain Kirk's macho and bluster, an awful lot of those episodes are either him being light or solving problems without, just guns a-blazing. That they're solving problems with
It's a science fiction show.
Yeah.
It has an intellectual mystery. You have to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, and I like how they're capturing that again now with Strange New Worlds, that Captain Pike is not going in guns blazing, that he wins, he changes hearts and minds with his heart and mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that works beautifully. I also think they got a lot of great actors. I already mentioned in the spoiler-free section how I thought Anson Mount, Ethan Peck, and Rebecca Romijn play such wonderful versions.
And we also have one season to really become attached to her, so
Right.
that what happens in the last episode matters.
Right, so that when we see her, getting called on her lie, now we're like, okay, what's going to happen next season?
Yes. Well, that's more of a next gen kind of thing to have a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
But I still think that the spirit of the show, as you say, is with a very open approach to science fiction. Where, we can do time travel stories, we can do alternate realities, we can, do ship in a bottle mysteries, all different kinds of science fiction stories that are possible in Star Trek.
And we can be light. And we can be light as well. There was that one episode where the Doctor's daughter ends up having her favorite story come to life with the Enterprise crew. And one of my online friends was very disappointed in that episode because to him, it needs to be serious. It needs to be hard sci-fi, and that was too light and silly. But
it is silly and whimsical.
But a lot of Trek, a lot of original series, you look at episodes like A Piece of the Action in original Trek, and they all end up on 1920s gangster planet, and they get out of prison by faking a card game. I mean, come on. This, they had their silly episodes too.
Yes, they did. And I still say that all of this that we're seeing in Strange New Worlds is an updating of what we saw in the first Trek series.
Right.
And I don't think that they're going to run out of stories anytime soon because, when you have a lot of quality lore to draw on, that's when shows get really good and they can go on, not to cross genres, but Game of Thrones, right? It was great for all the seasons that they had books for.
Right, so, and that's when it started going off the rails because there were no rails anymore. Yeah.
Right. So I think Strange New Worlds is going to be good for at least 3 seasons.
Yeah, minimum. If I were to criticize anything, and this is like a minor criticism, and this is, we're in the spoiler section, so this is in the finale. Like I said, I love the fact that they brought original series characters into it. Ethan Peck, just like I would say the same and I have said the same about Zach Quinto in the movies, is that both of those men, Ethan Peck and Zach Quinto? Is it Quinto or Quinto?
I think it's Quinto.
Quinto. They don't do a caricature of Leonard Nimoy's Spock. They each do their own Spock, but they each tapped into the core that here is a Vulcan who is literally bursting with emotion and holding it in rather than a emotionless wooden robot. And I think they do, I love Ethan Peck's Spock. I love Anson Mount's Captain Pike, and I love Rebecca Romijn's number 1. I don't remember the actress's name who plays Uhura, but I think she also does a wonderful job. So in the very last episode, we get hints of 2 other TOS characters. One is we hear Spock talking to the engineer, and the engineer has a very Scottish voice. And I thought that was a very cute call to Scotty. And I thought the voice actor did a wonderful job. And then we got to see a cameo of Strange New Worlds Captain James T. Kirk. And I have to say, we didn't get a lot of him, so my mind is still open. But when I think of the kind of person Captain Kirk is, now admittedly, William Shatner's shoes are so gigantic, no one can fill them. But I give Chris Pike all the credit in the world for playing his own Captain Kirk, but giving it the same kind of inner bravado that William Shatner gave his character. I did not get that from the guy they got to play James T. Kirk on Strange New World. But they also didn't give him a ton to do.
No, they didn't. And this is definitely a timeline that has a Kirk, but it's not the same Kirk as the other timelines. And that's, kind of just a side effect of having so many Trek shows.
Right.
That now we have multiple timelines going on.
The actor's name is Paul Wesley.
Paul Wesley is the guy who played James T. Kirk.
And Uhura was Celia Rose Gooding.
Yeah, Celia Rose Gooding is fantastic. She is absolutely fantastic as Uhura. And that's the thing. I mean, when you've got great actors, that really elevates your show. And
yeah, it does.
And they did the casting. I mean, the casting for Strange New Worlds has been absolutely wonderful. I love the guy they got to play the Andorian, I think he was, engineer, the blind engineer.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was wonderful in the role as well. And
right. Well, they did set it up so, he was an interesting character, but now he's getting replaced with a classic character.
Right. And I think that speaks well for the writers that they were able to give him enough meat that it wasn't like, oh, here's a character who's only ever had 2 lines in the entire show, and now we're getting rid of him, and you don't really care because you didn't really get to know him, even though you've seen him every episode for 5 minutes. No, he was a real character with... Hemmer?
Hemmer's the character, and Bruce Horek is the actor.
I love that
he might even be back because that makeup was, quite disguising.
Right.
Oh, a little bit of behind the scenes on production. Strange New Worlds is mostly photographed on an LED volume.
Oh, like the Marvel, like the Star Wars shows.
Yes, but this is one that's located up in Toronto.
Okay.
And our characters do interact with a real physical set, but all the VFX enhancements are actually there in the room. They're not added in post-production. What we see, the audience sees, is what the characters are seeing for the most part, because their environment is, virtual projection. Yeah. So it can be incredibly detailed and full of visual effects in real time.
That's fantastic.
Didn't we read the other day that they actually have already finished filming season 2?
Yeah, they actually just finished season 2. That's one of the things about all of these VFX heavy shows is that principal photography happens long before we see it, because they do so much of the visual effects. And so they just finished filming, the principal photography for season 2. That doesn't mean it's going to be ready for quite a while because they need to assemble it all and everything else. But
right. Well, they could probably deliver it by Christmas, but I'm sure they're going to wait till next year.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, that's great. I love the Star Wars shows, and I love the fact that they use the volume, that they use that way of making shows, because I think, we've heard actors say repeatedly that the more environment they have to interact with, the more it informs and enhances their own performance. And so the closer we can get to giving them what the audience sees on their set, I think the better it's going to be for the performance, and that is going to enhance the show. And that's fantastic. I didn't know that, but I think that's great. I'm glad to hear that.
Technology, is spreading to more shows. And people probably have more creative ways of using it.
Just a smart way to do it.
Yeah. It takes a lot of money. I mean, you have to...
Well, it takes millions and millions of dollars to build the volume.
Right. If you've watched it, I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. If you haven't watched it yet, absolutely give it a chance, because I do think this may become your favorite of the Trek shows.
Yes, the first episode is good, and I'd say the last two episodes are outstanding.
Yes, I'd absolutely. This is a show that started strong, but got stronger.
At least like 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah, it started strong, but got stronger. Absolutely and definitely. Yeah, fantastic show. And I'm glad they're making Trek in general, but I'm really glad they're making Star Trek Strange New Worlds.
Yes, Strange New Worlds has kind of restored my faith in Star Trek's future.
Right. And
Star Trek has given us so many wonderful visions of the future, but it seemed like Trek itself had run out of heart. But now it's got it. Or maybe if it hadn't run out of heart, it was running out of mind.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I know
this show has mind and heart.
Yeah. I know that Alex Kurtzman, who had worked with JJ on the rebooted movies, is kind of the, I don't want to say Kevin Feige, but he's the overseer of the Trekverse. And sometimes great, sometimes not. But I think he got a really good team to build this show. And, good for him for knowing how to get the right people on the job.
Oh, and can I just say that I love the return to these more literary titles.
Yes.
Like there's an episode called Memento Mori.
Right.
Or The Elysian Kingdom, or A Quality of Mercy.
Right.
I mean, that's not a dumb title. That's a very thoughtful title.
Right. Yeah, I noticed that as well. And like I said, like we talked about, a lot of intelligence went into this show. And of course, they also have to make it in, casual contemporary language to appeal to a contemporary audience of streamers, that they have to, catch people quickly as they're just quickly trying to figure out what they want to watch or whatever. But I think they do a good job of appealing to a modern, possibly younger audience, while at the same time maintaining the intelligence and integrity of what those of us who've loved Trek forever originally fell in love with.
Yes. I just hope that they have what Westworld fans would call fidelity to the original series in the next season and the coming seasons, because I think that is the secret to their success.
Yeah, I am very much looking forward to season 2, and I hope they keep doing what they're doing, giving a fresh look at the themes and strengths of the old series while bringing them to a modern audience in a wonderful and modern way.
Oh, and can I just say that Zachary Quinto and Ethan Peck have wonderful voices.
They do.
And quality of their voice and how they speak is such a part of how they bring that character alive, and why it feels like it's Spock.
Mm-hmm.
Because Leonard Nimoy gave Spock a very iconic voice. So
right.
I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah.
Because people are always looking at things, but this is something to listen.
Right. That there is an iconic tone to Spock that they've both managed to capture brilliantly in their own way. Excellent. Well, thank you, Golden. Thank you, David.
Welcome. Hey, you're welcome.
And that's it for this episode. You can find the show notes at theomegabeam.com/180. If you liked this episode, please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Your reviews help people who like this stuff find our podcast. If you have any comments or suggestions, please drop us a line at info@theomegabeam.com. Be good to yourselves and each other, and we'll catch you next time.
The Omega Beam. Full stop.